The chamber of the Galactic Council pulsed with a low, resonant hum, the kind of sound produced when 1,000 voices argued in a dozen languages. Hollow screens flickered above the polished obsidian floor, showing replay after replay of devastation. Fleets torn to ribbons, armored battalions scattered like insects before a storm, planetary colonies emptied overnight. Every recording ended the same way, with a shadow in the trees, golden eyes gleaming, and bodies strewn across the dirt. No one said its name aloud, but all knew it. The Varrock. For centuries, the Council had declared it untouchable, a living calamity that moved from system to system as though mocking their fleets. Worlds were left to die when it arrived. Populations abandoned entire continents at the whisper of its approach. It was not a species, not a swarm, but a singular predator. One beast that crushed armies as easily as a child snapped twigs. The elder races squabbled about strategies they knew would fail. The insectoid Zrathi shrieked for total annihilation campaigns. The crystalline Geldar advised quarantines, sacrificing planets to preserve the wider galaxy. The scaled and ironclad Vern Confederacy, proud conquerors in their own right, demanded the beast be weaponized. To them, even the deadliest predator must kneel before civilization. And then, inevitably, one of them sneered in humanity's direction. Why are the humans even permitted at this table? Hissed Chancellor Vor of the Geldar, crystalline skin catching the chamber's light. They are children of the void, primitives. Their worlds are barely scarred with the ink of spacefaring history. What knowledge could they offer against this horror? All eyes shifted toward the human delegation, seated at the edge of the council ring. Captain Elias Kane rose slowly. He wasn't dressed in ornate robes or ceremonial armor, but in a simple scout's jacket, worn at the elbows, the kind of practical uniform that earned respect on the frontier but disdain in marble halls. His frame was solid, his stance easy, but his eyes carried something most of the counselors lacked. A soldier's calm acceptance that the impossible might happen any day. Kane let the question hang for a moment, then answered evenly. Perhaps nothing. Or perhaps perspective. His voice carried through the chamber without strain, amplified not by technology but by conviction. You've thrown fleets at this thing. You've tried to cage it. You've named it a god of death, a living storm. Maybe you're too focused on the wrong approach. The Vern war chief barked a laugh. And you think humans have the right one? I think, Kane said, that no army has ever stood before it. And maybe no army is what it needs. A silence followed, sharper than the clamor before it. Some laughed, some spat, but the council chair leaned forward, mandibles clicking. The chair represented neutrality itself, yet even it betrayed a flicker of curiosity. Then you volunteer, human? Kane did not hesitate. I'll go. A hiss of disbelief rippled through the chamber. To the elder races, this was suicide declared calmly, madness disguised as bravery. But to Kane it was something else. His kind had hunted lions with spears, crossed oceans in fragile ships, stared down predators larger and stronger than themselves. Humanity's history was carved in scars and tooth marks. The galaxy hadn't yet understood that. Later, in the silence of his assigned quarters, Kane reviewed the mission slate. A jungle moon on the galaxy's rim. Scattered reports confirmed that the Varrock had nested there for now, licking wounds from some failed attempt by mercenary hunters to subdue it. The council, divided and afraid, had approved Kane's proposal less out of belief than amusement. Let the human throw his life away. Perhaps in dying he'd teach them something about futility. But Kane wasn't walking into futility. He studied the images, clawed corpses, collapsed fortifications, the brief blur of a colossal frame moving through foliage. His jaw tightened. It reminded him, uncomfortably, of old Earth footage, grainy shots of wolves circling firelight, tigers slinking through jungle shadows, apex predators that had once been invincible until men with patience, courage, and a little food changed the balance. The transport ship was small, unmarked, meant for stealth rather than strength. A handful of alien scouts had been assigned to accompany him. When they boarded, Kane saw the unease etched into their features. The Zrathi buzzed with nervous pheromones. The Geldar carried an air of brittle fragility, as though ready to fracture at a single sound. The Vern soldier, despite his heavy armor, muttered curses under his breath. They had been sent because they were expendable. As the ship descended into the canopy of the jungle moon, the cabin lights flickered with the interference of dense atmosphere. Beyond the glass, Kane saw green stretching endlessly, broken only by rivers that shone like molten silver in the sun. The place teemed with life, every inch of it filled with noise, movement, danger. Perfect hunting ground. The Vern turned to Kane as they prepared to disembark. You understand, human, when we see it, we run. No creature bends to command. No weapon kills it. Remember that. Kane strapped on his pack, adjusted the rifle slung across his back and smiled faintly. You can run. I'll see how close it lets me stand. The hatch opened and the jungle swallowed them whole. By dusk the air was heavy with tension. Crushed bodies of armored beasts lay half buried in the undergrowth, their shells split by claws strong enough to shear steel. Trees bore scars as wide as a man's chest. The scouts trembled, whispering that they had entered the heart of the Varric's territory. Kane crouched near a torn carcass, fingertips brushing the dirt. The marks weren't fresh, maybe a day old, but close. He rose slowly, scanning the treeline. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Even the constant drone of insects faltered. And then he saw them. Two golden eyes, burning in the gloom like twin suns. The Varric stepped into view, a shadow given muscle and claw. Its body was covered in jagged scars, its massive frame moving with the terrible grace of something too powerful to fear any rival. But Kane's gaze locked on the limp in its stride, the dark slash across its shoulder where plasma had burned through flesh. Wounded, yes, but still terrifying beyond comprehension. The alien scouts froze. One bolted into the trees with a shriek, another collapsed to trembling knees. Kane stood his ground, heart hammering but will unshaken. Slowly, deliberately he lowered his rifle to the dirt. From his pack he withdrew a ration bar, nothing more than compressed nutrients, bland and human. He unwrapped it, broke it in half and set it on the ground between them. The Varric snarled, a sound that rattled the very air, but it did not strike. Its nostrils flared. Hunger gleamed behind its eyes. Kane did not move, did not threaten. He only waited. The beast inched closer, claws gouging earth. With a rumble like rolling thunder, it lowered its head, jaws opening wide. For an instant, Kane knew he stood a heartbeat away from death. Then the Varric snapped up the ration and chewed, golden eyes never leaving his face. High above, council drones circled, recording every second. In the chamber light years away, the elder races gasped, voices rising in disbelief. The human had fed it. And the predator had accepted. The jungle moon did not sleep. Even when the second sun dipped below the canopy, the air pulsed with unseen movement, with rustling wings, with low growls reverberating through the undergrowth. Elias Kane remained where he had been, seated cross-legged on the damp soil, his eyes fixed on the golden gaze of the Varric. The half-eaten ration wrapper lay discarded between them, flimsy evidence of a moment that should not have been possible. Every instinct screamed at him that this was madness. Every lesson he had learned as a soldier told him that stillness was his greatest weapon. The scouts who had come with him were gone. One had fled screaming, his shrieks swallowed by the jungle. Another had collapsed in terror before scrambling into the foliage, never looking back. Their absence did not trouble Kane. Their fear only confirmed what he already knew, that this was a meeting meant for him alone. The Varric's breathing was heavy, each exhale carrying the hot stink of blood and iron. Its shoulder wound was deeper than he first guessed, the edges seared from plasma fire, the flesh swollen and inflamed. Even weakened, the predator was magnificent. Its muscles rippled with latent violence, and every movement spoke of power restrained only by pain. Kane reached into his pack again, slower this time. The Varric's head snapped toward the motion, teeth glinting in the moonlight. He kept his voice low and even, not for the beast's understanding but for his own control. Easy. Not a weapon. He pulled out his canteen, twisted the cap, and poured a stream of water into a shallow depression in the earth. The predator's ears twitched at the sound. For several long breaths, it only stared. Then, with surprising delicacy, it lowered its massive head and lapped from the pool. The sight locked something in Kane's chest, a realization that the line between myth and truth was thinner than the council believed. To them, this creature was a living catastrophe. To him, it was thirsty, hurt, and still alive because sheer endurance had carried it through battles no other being would have survived. When the canteen was empty, the Varric sat back watching him. Kane forced himself to rise to his feet, his movements slow, deliberate, without threat. He approached within 3 steps, close enough that the beast's breath brushed against his skin, close enough to see the heat shimmer rising from its wound. He unhooked a tube of medgel from his belt. "This will sting," he murmured, voice tight. The Varric growled deep in its throat, a warning more than a promise. But it did not strike when Kane stretched the gel across the burned flesh, did not lash out when pain flared through its muscles. Its claws dug trenches in the soil, its jaws opened in a silent snarl, yet it allowed him to finish. That allowance felt like a covenant. Kane stepped back, sweat dripping down his temple. The beast's breathing steadied, its eye fixed on him not with hostility but with something harder to name. Recognition, perhaps. He had touched it and lived. The night thickened, heavy with fog and insect drone. Kane built a small fire, not to ward the predator but to keep the smaller dangers at bay. He set out another ration bar, this one untouched, and leaned back against a tree. The Varrock did not move to eat immediately. Instead it circled once, great shoulders brushing foliage aside, then settled close enough that Kane could feel the heat radiating from its body. The earth trembled each time its chest rose and fell. High above, council drones recorded every heartbeat of the scene. In the chamber, silence would reign, punctuated only by the disbelief of elders unaccustomed to being wrong. Kane imagined their faces and almost smiled. The peace lasted until dawn, broken not by the predator but by the shriek of metal cutting through air. Kane's head snapped upward. Dropships, their hulls painted in mercenary insignia, punched through the canopy with brutal disregard. Plasma fire erupted as trees ignited, birds scattered, and the jungle screamed with sudden violence. The council had not waited. Some faction, impatient or terrified, had hired killers to claim the Varrock by force. The beast surged to its feet, a thunderclap of motion. Its roar split the air, shattering branches, shaking leaves from their stems. Kane grabbed his rifle, slamming a power cell into place. He shouted without thought, "Stay close," as if the creature might heed him. The first wave of mercenaries landed, armored figures fanning out in formation. Their scanners swept the clearing, locking onto the predator instantly. Orders barked through comms. Kill the human, capture the beast alive. Kane fired first, his shot punching through the visor of the nearest soldier. The Varrock exploded forward at the same instant, a blur of claws and muscle. It hit the line like a meteor, scattering armored bodies in every direction. Metal shrieked beneath its strength, plasma rifles bent like toys. Kane advanced with it, covering blind angles, taking down targets that dared flank its sides. The jungle burned. Smoke curled into the rising light. But in that chaos, a rhythm emerged, predator and human moving not as strangers but as a unit. Kane provided precision, the Varrock provided destruction. Each seemed to anticipate the other, an unspoken agreement forged in the space between heartbeat and breath. When the last mercenary stumbled backward, bleeding and terrified, Kane leveled his rifle but did not fire. He looked at the Varrock, its claws raised, its snarl echoing across the clearing. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lifted one hand and lowered it. Enough. The predator froze. Its growl faded to a rumble but it obeyed. It let the survivor flee into the trees. Kane felt the weight of unseen eyes, council drones above, watching the impossible unfold. The galaxy's deadliest predator had stopped at a human's word. The fire crackled in the ruins of the clearing. The Varrock lowered its massive head until it hovered inches above Kane's shoulder. A sound like a low purr vibrated in its chest, resonant and startling. Kane exhaled, the enormity of the moment sinking into his bones. So we understand each other after all. And somewhere, light years away, the council chamber drowned in stunned silence. The clearing still reeked of smoke and scorched metal. Elias Kane moved among the wreckage, checking for supplies, stripping energy cells from broken rifles, keeping his hands steady though the adrenaline had yet to fade. The Varrock prowled the edges of the burned jungle, claws clicking against stone, its massive shoulders rolling with unspent fury. Every so often it glanced toward him, not as a hunter measuring prey, but as if to confirm his presence. That constant acknowledgement unsettled him more than its roar. He knelt by a mercenary body and pulled free a half-charred data pad. The device flickered, broadcasting fragments of their orders. He pieced them together slowly. Capture the Varrock, extract it for council experiments, terminate the human if necessary. The words were no surprise, but seeing them written stripped away any illusion of council restraint. They were not waiting for his report. They were hedging their bets, sending killers while he played diplomat. The predator drew closer, head lowering toward the device in his hand. Its nostrils flared as though it could smell treachery on the circuits. Kane snapped the pad shut and shoved it into his pack. "You and me both, friend. No one's playing fair." His voice seemed to soothe it. The Varrock sat back on its haunches, a mountain of scarred flesh and muscle, and simply watched. In that stillness, Kane remembered childhood stories told in dim-lit classrooms back on Earth, myths of wolves circling fires, lions crouched on the edge of villages. Humanity had faced down monsters before. They had learned, through patience and courage, that survival meant more than fear, it meant coexistence. Perhaps the council had forgotten that lesson, or perhaps they had never known it. He tore open another ration and placed it on the ground. The predator consumed it with a grunt, jaws snapping just inches from his hand, but not once grazing his skin. Kane studied the way it moved, how it paused between bites as if gauging his reaction. A rhythm was forming between them, tentative but real. Trust was not yet given, but earned in fragments, one bite of food, one whispered word at a time. While the beast ate, Kane cleaned his rifle. His motions were mechanical, habit burned into his muscles from years of soldiering. Yet part of his mind wandered to the council chamber, imagining the scene as drones broadcast his every gesture. The elders, cloaked in arrogance, watching a predator lower its head beside a human. Some would call it heresy. Others would call it a weapon. He feared neither as much as the possibility they might be right about both. Night crept back into the jungle. Insects resumed their ceaseless chorus, and shadows pooled where fire had stripped the canopy. Kane remained awake, back against a scorched trunk, the varrock lying only a few strides away. Its eyes gleamed like molten gold in the darkness. When smaller creatures skulked too near, it rose with a snarl and drove them off, returning to settle again as though nothing had passed. For the first time, Kane allowed himself to think of it as an ally. By dawn he moved deeper into the jungle, the predator shadowing his steps. It did not follow like a pet, nor march as a soldier would. It moved parallel, a guardian orbiting a fragile star. Birds scattered at its passage, trees bent beneath its weight. Kane glanced at it once, caught the tilt of its head, and realized it was studying him just as carefully as he studied it. Their uneasy rhythm was broken when shapes appeared ahead. Scavengers, lean-bodied aliens draped in bone armor, armed with blades fashioned from the same. They had followed the scent of battle, drawn to plunder the dead. When they spotted Kane, their eyes gleamed with hunger. One raised a jagged spear and barked in a tongue Kane didn't know but understood well enough. Surrender or bleed. Kane raised his rifle slowly, his voice low and calm. Don't. The scavengers laughed. They took a step forward. That was when the jungle itself seemed to open its jaws. The varrock burst from the shadows with a roar that shook the marrow in Kane's bones. It tore into the scavengers with a fury that made the mercenary attack look like sparring. Limbs scattered, bone armor shattered, and screams died abruptly. Kane didn't fire a single shot. He didn't need to. When it was over, the predator turned back toward him, muzzle dark with blood. Kane's finger hovered on his rifle trigger, but he forced it away. The beast stood waiting, chest heaving, eyes locked on his face. He took a careful step forward, then another. His boots crunched on broken bone and still it did not move. When he was close enough, he reached out, hand trembling, and brushed the edge of its jaw. Its skin was rough, scarred, hot beneath his palm. The varrock closed its eyes just for an instant as if accepting the contact. The moment was brief, but its weight was colossal. Kane lowered his hand, heart pounding with something that was not fear but awe. He understood now that their connection was not coincidence. It was choice on both sides. Far away in the council chamber, uproar must already be raging. Drones did not miss such moments. Some delegates would demand his execution before he returned. Others would demand the predator's immediate capture, certain it could be bound by chains if a human could touch it. None of them would see what Kane did, a creature not tamed, not broken, but willing to stand beside him. He exhaled, glancing toward the jungle's endless expanse. We're in this together now. Like it or not. The varrock rumbled low in its chest, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. Kane didn't need to understand its language to know what it meant. And as the rising sun lit the jungle in bands of gold, both man and beast turned their eyes toward the horizon, where the council's next move would come crashing down upon them. The jungle no longer felt untouched. The air carried the metallic tang of smoldering wreckage, and the undergrowth bent beneath the weight of intrusion. Kane sensed the shift long before the first ship pierced the clouds. The council would never leave him to his own designs. They feared what they did not control. And now they feared him as much as the creature at his side. The sky split open with the scream of thrusters. Dropships descended in formation, their bellies bristling with weapons. Dust billowed where they struck the earth, casting shadows over the canopy. Kane steadied his rifle, jaw tightening. He had expected this but not so soon. His companion, the varrock, rose from its crouch, golden eyes narrowing as if it too had anticipated betrayal. The mercenaries deployed with cold precision. Armored lines advanced, exosuits gleaming beneath the fractured sunlight. They were not scavengers, nor the scattered hunters who had fallen before. These were professionals, Soldiers paid in blood, trained to overwhelm through fire and numbers. Their commander's voice rang through amplifiers, sharp and merciless. Target the human first. Weaken the beast. Capture it alive. Kane spat into the dirt. Always the same mistake, he muttered. The first salvo came in a storm of plasma. Kane dove for cover, his shoulder slamming against the base of a scorched tree. Bolts hissed past, searing bark into ash. The Varrock did not hide. It leapt into the barrage with a roar that rattled the sky. Shots struck its hide, burning fur, carving shallow trenches into flesh, but momentum carried it forward. It crashed into the mercenary line like a thunderclap, scattering armored bodies with a force no formation could withstand. Kane surged out of cover, using the chaos as a shield. His rifle barked in sharp bursts, each round punching through weak points in the mercenary's armor. He moved with practiced efficiency, not wasting a single shot. When enemies tried to flank the predator, Kane cut them down. When the beast drew fire, Kane's aim struck true. Man and monster fought not as separate forces but as halves of the same rhythm. A mech unit lumbered forward, its cannons swiveling toward the Varrock. Kane swore under his breath and sprinted across open ground. He vaulted over a fallen mercenary, dropped to one knee and fired 3 shots into the mech's joints. Sparks erupted, gears seized, and the Varrock slammed into it an instant later, claws tearing the machine apart in a shriek of rending steel. The explosion lit Kane's face as he rolled clear, heat licking his skin. Above the battlefield, drones recorded everything. Kane could almost feel the council's gaze on the back of his neck, 1,000 judging eyes drinking in every defiance of their expectations. They would see a predator obey no chain. They would see a human shaping its fury into purpose. And they would fear it. The mercenary commander barked fresh orders, rallying his troops into a tighter formation. Shields shimmered into place, a wall of energy and steel. The Varrock slammed against it, teeth gnashing, claws sparking against the barrier. The line held. Soldiers advanced behind the shield, weapons blazing. For the first time, Kane saw his ally falter, its strength checked by coordinated discipline. Kane knew the council wanted proof of weakness, of limits. He would not give it to them. He dropped his rifle, grabbed a satchel of explosives from a fallen mercenary, and sprinted low to the ground. Plasma fire carved the air around him, searing close enough that the heat burned his arm. He reached the shield wall, primed the charge and slammed it against the generator's base. The blast tore through the formation, sending soldiers sprawling. The Varrock surged through the breach with a roar that made the earth tremble. Its claws shredded armor, its weight crushed exosuits flat. It was no longer a beast on the defensive but a storm given flesh, every strike an answer to centuries of fear. Kane followed in its wake, picking off stragglers, ensuring no blade touched its flank unseen. Together they broke the line and ground it into ruin. When only silence remained, the battlefield looked less like victory than revelation. Smoke coiled into the canopy. Broken machines lay twisted among bodies. The Varrock stood at the center, chest heaving, its fur matted with blood, some its own, most not. Kane approached slowly, rifle slung back over his shoulder, his steps heavy with exhaustion. The surviving mercenary commander lay pinned beneath rubble, his helmet cracked, his voice ragged with terror. The Varrock loomed over him, jaws opening wide, ready to end it. Kane lifted his hand, palm outward. His voice carried no command, barked in anger, only steady certainty. No. The predator froze. For a long, suspended moment, Kane thought the word would be ignored, that instinct would triumph over fragile understanding. Then the beast's jaws closed. It stepped back, leaving the commander to scramble away into the smoking jungle. The council would see that too, the deadliest predator in the galaxy halting at a human's single word. Kane placed his hand against its scarred flank. The Varrock rumbled low in its chest, the sound neither growl nor purr but something between, something new. They had fought side by side and survived. The bond had been tested in fire and blood and it had held. Exhaustion settled over Kane's shoulders, heavier than his pack. He glanced skyward, knowing the council had seen everything. They would not stay silent after this. The galaxy would change now, whether by choice or by fear. He did not know which outcome awaited him, but as the predator lowered its massive head beside him, Kane found he did not dread it. The jungle whispered in the aftermath of battle, and above the smoke-choked canopy, new shadows moved in orbit. The council's response was already coming. The council ships hung above the world like silent blades, their silver hulls catching the light of a waning sun. Kane could see them even through the thick canopy, their presence a constant weight pressing down from the heavens. The jungle, once alive with distant cries and hidden motion, felt subdued, as though even the wild had learned to fear what loomed above. He knew their eyes were on him, judging, calculating, waiting. The Varrock lay at his side, its breathing deep but uneven, each exhalation carrying the rasp of wounds barely closed. Cain had dressed what he could with strips of cloth and salves scavenged from fallen soldiers, but the beast's strength was fading. He stroked the thick fur along its neck, his hand steady despite the turmoil inside. "They'll come soon," Cain said softly, more to himself than to the predator. "Not with mercenaries this time. They'll bring their champions. Their executioners." The Varrock's golden eyes flicked open, gleaming in the dim light, and for a moment Cain thought he glimpsed something more than instinct, an understanding, a shared readiness. He had seen soldiers falter, commanders retreat, but this creature did not know surrender. That perhaps was why the council feared it most. When the attack came, it was swift. Shuttles burned through the atmosphere, sleek and black, their descent marked by streaks of fire. They landed in a wide perimeter around Cain's position, sealing him in a tightening circle. From them poured not mercenaries but the council's own guard, warriors bred and trained to uphold their authority with absolute precision. Their armor was smooth and black, etched with insignias that shimmered faintly, symbols of a power that believed itself eternal. A voice boomed through amplifiers, echoing across the ravaged battlefield. "Human Cain, you have trespassed into forbidden realms. You have allied yourself with an abomination that threatens galactic order. Lay down your arms. Deliver the creature. Your life will be spared." Cain rose slowly to his feet, rifle hanging loose at his side. His lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. "Funny thing about order," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach them. "It never seems to belong to the ones who bleed for it." The Varrock stirred, pushing itself upright with a growl that reverberated across the field. The soldiers responded in unison, rifles snapping up, formation tightening. Their discipline was perfect, their precision absolute. Yet Cain could see it, the flicker of doubt in the lines of their shoulders, the weight of stories whispered across systems about a beast no one could control, save a single human. The battle erupted without warning. The council's guard advanced, their rifles unleashing synchronized volleys of crackling plasma. Cain moved with ruthless efficiency, diving behind the carcass of a shattered mech, returning fire in sharp, measured bursts. The Varrock thundered forward, heedless of the storm. Shots burned into its hide, each impact drawing a guttural snarl, yet it pressed on, its sheer momentum tearing through the first ranks like fragile glass. Cain fought not only with skill but with fury sharpened into clarity. Every shot he fired bought the predator another step, another heartbeat. Every orderless cry from a fallen guard reminded the council above that fear was a contagion even their strongest could not cure. But the council had not come to test, they had come to end. From the largest shuttle emerged their champion. A towering figure clad in armor unlike the rest, forged of dark alloy that shimmered with shifting light. In its hands was a weapon that bent the air around it, a spear of energy humming with contained annihilation. The guards parted to let the figure advance, and even the Varrock hesitated, golden eyes narrowing as it circled. The champion moved with a predator's grace, each step deliberate, every motion promising finality. Its voice was distorted, resonant through its helmet. "Human, step aside. The beast's end is inevitable. Do not waste your blood." Cain tightened his grip on the rifle, then let it fall. His eyes never left the champion as he stepped closer to the Varrock. "You don't get it, do you?" he said. He laid a hand on the predator's scarred flank. "It isn't about whether it dies or lives. It's about who it chooses." With a roar that shook the very air, the Varrock lunged. The champion met it head-on, spear thrusting forward, catching the beast across the shoulder in a flare of searing energy. Flesh burned, the stench sharp and immediate. The Varrock howled, twisting with primal violence, claws raking across the champion's armor. Sparks flew, plates screeched under the strain, but the armor held. Cain moved at the edges of the clash, searching, waiting. The champion was too fast, too focused, its weapon carving arcs of light that drove the predator back with each strike. Yet every time the spear thrust, every time the champion pressed, the Varrock answered with rage undiminished. It would not yield, and Cain would not watch it fall alone. He charged, seizing a discarded plasma rifle from the ground. He fired at close range, the bolts hammering into the champion's flank. The armored figure staggered, turning its attention toward Cain. That single moment was all the Varrock needed. With a savage roar, it struck, its claws sinking into a gap at the champion's side. Metal buckled. The spear faltered. The champion's counterstrike came fast, too fast. The spear plunged into the Varric's chest, a burst of white-hot energy tearing through its body. The predator convulsed, a guttural roar breaking into silence. Kane's heart lurched as he saw its massive frame collapse, crashing into the ground with a final, thunderous impact. No! Kane's voice tore from his throat. He raised the rifle and emptied it into the champion, bolt after bolt slamming into weakened armor until sparks erupted, smoke poured, and the figure stumbled. But it did not fall. With grim inevitability, it turned its burning visor back toward him, spear rising for the killing blow. Then against all reason the Varric moved. Its chest rose ragged and broken, yet its eyes blazed with feral light. With a final surge, it lunged upward, its jaws closing around the champion's neck. Metal crumpled. Energy flared uncontrolled. The champion's body convulsed as the predator tore through armor and flesh alike, dragging the figure to the ground in a violent collapse. The explosion came seconds later, the spear overloading, consuming its bearer in a burst of annihilation. The blast threw Kane backward, the ground quaking beneath him. When the smoke cleared, the champion was gone, scattered fragments of armor marking its end. The Varric lay beside the wreckage, still and unmoving. Kane crawled to its side, his hands trembling as he pressed them against its bloodied fur. The rise and fall of its chest was faint, fragile, yet there. Its golden eyes opened one last time, meeting his with a calm that no roar could capture. He pressed his forehead to its own, words failing, breath catching in his throat. Above, the council ships shifted. Their silence felt heavier than any weapon. They had watched their champion fall, their order broken by the bond between human and predator. They could send more soldiers, more fleets, but something fundamental had already slipped from their grasp. The galaxy had seen. The legend was no longer theirs to shape. Kane rose, his hand still resting on the predator's flank. His voice carried through the smoky air, not to the council above but to anyone listening. It chose. Not chains. Not fear. Not you. Me. The council ships did not fire. One by one their engines flared, and they began to retreat, vanishing into the darkening sky. Kane stood alone with his wounded companion, the jungle stretching silent around them. He did not know what future awaited, what wars or reckonings might follow. But he knew this: the deadliest predator in the galaxy had bowed its will not to an empire, not to fear but to a human's touch. And no council decree could ever erase that truth,